This is, for me, is going to be a very exciting panel because these are experts up here, every single one of them, to talk about the gap in women negotiating and also to just skills in negotiating. How do you actually negotiate? And there's going to be some very interesting perspectives from each of the panelists today on really building your negotiation strategies. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole Husband, who is your moderator for today, and she's going to start us off for this panel. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for having us, Davida. Davida and I met while we were both working at Warner Brothers many years ago and kept in touch. So it's great to keep those relationships up. As Davida said, my name is Nicole Husband. I am a vice president of human resources at Warner Brothers Television. I'm what they call a recovering lawyer. I used to practice law for almost 20 years as an employment lawyer, and I decided to make the change over to human resources, where I negotiate executive contracts and manage employee relations issues. So I am your moderator today. What we're going to do is go through some quick introductions, and then I'll give you a little roadmap, and then we'll jump right into our discussion. So why don't we start with you, Daniel?
Hi, I'm Dan Wu. I'm a partner at LKP Global. We work a lot with early stage companies and venture capital, and I help generally negotiate employment agreements, financing transactions, and generally all things that an entrepreneur generally needs.
Hi, I'm Sanam Sabre, Senior Director, Legal Operations for Box. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're a content management solution platform. So basically connecting and collaborating worldwide on any device. And so I started off with Box when we were a startup and got to watch the experience of being a startup and then now being a public company and all of the changes, including diversity and inclusion, that have gone through, as well as salary negotiations.
And the first thing we talked about on this stage was do our spank show and how do we sit on a high chair and still make it work. Just because we're in a girls' thing, we might as well unplug with a few boys, just saying. I learned from a girlfriend of mine very recently, the Treasurer of the United States, a new phrase that I actually love is, I think I'm the accidental feminist. And she coined that phrase, but I'm taking it because as girlfriends, we all share. So I'm now using it. Any one of you can use it too. And I think that's what happened to me. I am a market researcher. I am the pioneer of, my name is Shelley Zalis, thank you. See how we support each other? And I'm the pioneer of online research, so those shitty surveys you get on the internet that take you 45 minutes to fill out, sorry, not sorry. So that's my claim to fame. But in the last couple of years, I started something called TFQ, the female quotient. Women belong in every equation. And as a manifestation, we created something called the Girls Lounge, which is a space at industry conferences for women to connect and collaborate, and most importantly, activate change together.
And I'm Corinne Benderski. I'm a professor here at UCLA in the business school, the Anderson School of Management. I'm in the area of management and organizations. My research specialties are in team effectiveness, negotiations, conflict management, and leadership development, and I'm just thrilled to be here with all of you and with this illustrious panel.
Great. Well, as I always say, if I forget to say thank you later, will you remind me? But thank you so much for having us, and thank you all for being on this panel. So just a quick roadmap of what we're going to do today. First, we're going to talk about the propensity to negotiate, or the propensity not to negotiate. Then we'll talk about the connection between negotiating and wage differences, and yes, there is a connection. And then we're going to talk more about negotiation, some defining it, demystifying it, giving you some strategies and tools for when you have to go off and negotiate something. So just going to jump right into our subject matter and ask Sanam to talk to us a little bit. We had some conference calls to prepare for our panel, and Sanam told us a little bit about her dual negotiating personality. So as we get into some statistics about wage differences from Dr. Bendersky, she didn't say that she's a doctor, but I'm going to call you the doctor. I would love to have you share a little bit of that before we get into those statistics about how that plays into the propensity to negotiate.
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit funny. So one of the teams that I manage is actually the commercial team, which is the team that negotiates all of our deals. And so all of my team consists of negotiators. And so I've been doing that for many, many years now. But it's very, very difficult for me to negotiate for myself. I'm one of those that I wish and I hope that my work speaks for itself. But I've learned and have been in practice enough to know that that's a little BS, and you got to kind of have your brand and you got to advocate for yourself. But it's still uncomfortable for me. And part of the negotiation strategy is you have to be authentic. You have to negotiate in a way that makes you feel comfortable with who you are. And so when I'm negotiating on my behalf, I take the me out of it, and I imagine that it's any other deal, it's any other client, what makes sense for that deal and what makes sense for that person. And so I kind of have this dual negotiation strategy, and it allows me also to take the feedback of whether it's something that is positive or negative or something that I have to work on to be able to achieve that in a really unbiased kind of way, and really approach that in a way that allows me to kind of maximize my own potential, because I'm negotiating for my client. It just happens to be Sanam Sabre Inc.
Right, great, thank you. And one of the things we will do today is just get some storytelling, because I love storytelling in a panel, so I hope that's all right with you guys, okay? But we are gonna get some hard statistics from the good doctor to share with us about the connection, actually statistics on propensity to negotiate, specifically women's propensity to negotiate. It would be great if we could start with those.
So one of the themes that I think you'll hear from this panel is when and why do women potentially negotiate differently than men? And Sanam's example is a good one to start off to help explain some of the evidence from academic research, looking across not anecdotes, but aggregating many different people's experiences in the real world, and also data from experiments that were run that control for a variety of other factors that might predict whether somebody may or may not negotiate or how effectively they do. And I want to tell you the bottom line first, and then we'll unpack it and try to give you some strategies for maximizing your own opportunities. As Sanam talked about, mentioned, one of the big differences between men's and women's negotiating outcomes is not so much when negotiating if men and women perform differently, but the likelihood or propensity to initiate a negotiation in the first place. And what academics have found is that the situation of negotiation triggers a whole bunch of gender stereotypes, our expectations for how women are supposed to behave or not behave. Hey, it's going. How do I do that? How do I make it stop? Wait, I wasn't done. Okay, so technology, women in technology. I'm clicking, so it's going. So I'll just talk and somebody else deal with that. Thank you. Okay, I just wanted on that first slide, if you could just hold it there steady, that'd be great. Because what I want to say is that the situation, when we think about negotiations, we get a whole bunch of cues and triggers that say, this is a situation where I need to be advocating for myself. And there's a bunch of stereotypes in our culture, beliefs about what's appropriate, the extent to which it's appropriate or inappropriate for women to be assertive and advocate on their own behalf. And the gender's triggers, we call them, in the negotiation scenario, and I'm talking about negotiating for yourself, for instance, a job, negotiating your compensation structure or a promotion or a raise, that triggers a bunch of stereotypes that women are not supposed to be strongly advocating on their own behalf. And that leads to behavior that's associated with a lower likelihood of engaging in negotiations. Now we know this is about stereotypes as opposed to skills, because we see that when women negotiate on behalf of other people, whether they're in a role and they're representing other people, or as a situation in which other people's interests are connected to the outcome of the negotiation, women negotiate as frequently, if not more so, and as competently, if not more so, than men in those same situations. So what we see is that when it's a negotiation that triggers expectations about what I can or cannot or should not do in terms of advocating on my own behalf, women tend to negotiate much less frequently than men. And if you'll change to the next screen, and hopefully it kind of is stable. So we see that the data from a number of different studies, and these are mostly using MBA graduates and their job market outcomes. Okay, will it just stop? Yes. Okay, cool. Stop. You can read through the numbers here, but what these studies have shown is that women are up to 50% less likely than men to negotiate their first offers for the jobs coming out of MBA programs. And those lead to considerable differences in initial salaries, which can aggregate over a career to $500,000. A $5,000 gap in initial salary can aggregate and accumulate to $500,000 lower career earnings. So that first initial negotiation can be very consequential. we see similar behavior in terms of negotiating bonuses and other things like that. And so the bottom line from the statistics and the studies is that women have a lower propensity to negotiate than men, but when they do negotiate, tend to do just as well as men. And so we're going to be talking about strategies to help you overcome some of those stereotypes that may be suppressing your comfort and feeling like it's appropriate or not for you to be negotiating those situations to mitigate those career intangible consequences of not doing so.
And I think just touching upon what you were saying, that sometimes cultural background comes into play too. I'm African American, and I was always taught we really don't talk about money. And so how does that play into how you go into a negotiation for yourself?
Right.
And then selling yourself. I was always taught we don't really like to sell things, you know, we don't want to do those fundraisers at school and that kind of thing. So all of that kind of comes up, and you got to think about, okay, what are these lessons that were taught to me, and how are those lessons affecting how I negotiate for myself? And just to your point, I was just thinking about how I used to advocate so much for the company. Like if an employee was fired and they sued Warner Brothers, and I would say, no, absolutely, they shouldn't get this much money, and we're going to keep this amount, this settlement amount's going to be really low, and I would have no problem arguing like crazy for the company. When it came to me arguing for my promotion, I would be like, well, you know, I really think that maybe, I mean, very kind of sitting back, not wanting to be too forward, and, you know, there's a balance, and we're going to talk about that, but it just came to mind as you were talking about that.
And actually, can I just share one story? That
Yes.
So I was with teaching negotiations to a group of MBA students, and through the conversation, it came out that the men in the class regularly talk to each other about how much they're making. And the women in class were like, you do what now? And what that does is it gives us, as women, much less information about our market value and comps. And so one of the takeaways is use something like Girls Club, Girls Lounge?
Girls Lounge.
Excuse me, Girls Lounge, to create a forum where it's okay to talk about things like how much are other people in my industry, in my field, in the roles I'm negotiating for, actually making, so that I have a realistic set of compensation numbers, but also make sure that you're not just selecting from among women who, if on average the women are making less than the men, if you only find out how much the women are making, you're actually giving yourself biased information. So there you go.
And it probably plays itself even more because on average, women make, is it somewhere around 70 cents or 79 cents to the dollar in terms of salary, women to men. And so then throw in the fact that we're not negotiating, and we keep getting farther and farther. But I'm really interested to hear from you, Dan, about how all of this stuff hits you at all, or if you have any opinion on what we've discussed so far.
Sure. I mean, for you know, Mike, one of the things I think, if you don't like to advocate for yourself, that's what, you know, if you have a lawyer, to make him the bad person to bring up certain
Or
things.
her.
Or her.
Or her. Make him or her an agent or things like that. If you're in contract negotiations, if you can't do that, the other way to negotiate, to give you a sense, is you have to think about how do I create leverage in this situation, right? Is it leverage through getting more information? Is it leverage through knowing more information about the situation or the person or what's going on in the company and why they can't lose you, or, you know, so it's all those areas are just being savvy about getting information, about networking, within your industry, but networking within the office, and even if you're in a big place, networking with other people in other divisions to figure out what is kind of going on so you can get more leverage. And I think sometimes when you get more leverage, then the negotiation is much easier. It's like you're playing poker and you know you got a great hand. You're gonna, you know, you can stay with a straight face and not be afraid of someone BSing you.
Yeah, but I think that poker analogy is a good one, because you need to know who you're playing with and what their sort of facial, or their tells, is that what they call it? And then, when they go like this, that means they have a really good hand or something like that. Shelley, I wanted to get you to weigh in on if you have a story from a past negotiation or somewhere where there's something that would really resonate with our audience today, but that really plays into what we're talking about today.
I think if I look back now, I never was conscious of the unconscious then as a woman in business. And I was the only female CEO in the top 25 in market research my whole career. And so I had no one to really talk to about that, and there was no number. So I think now if I look back and and challenge what I made versus everyone else. They probably owe me a shitload of money. So maybe I'll do that and we can all go shopping, which would be quite fun. But I also hate the waiting game, and so I always took it out of the equation with or without permission, which is probably why my title was Chief Troublemaker, because I always rocked the boat with or without permission, even at a young age. So I remember my first review at the age of, I think, 25. I'm now 54, so I'll never forget this. It was many, many years ago. I was great at business development, but business development, you don't see the numbers. I wasn't a revenue, working on revenue. I was generating it. And in market research, because of normative databases, it might take 3 years to convert a client to using a new research methodology, which is basically the same, but we position it as differently because of norms. And so here I was taking out clients for lunch and understanding clients and creating relationships, but there was no revenue necessarily attached until 3 years later, many reviews that passed. And I went to my review and I'm thinking, wow, I'm gonna have such a great review because I was such a goody two-shoes. I came in early, I stayed late, I asked everyone to help them, and I had the shittiest review, and it sucked. And they looked at me and they're like, well, you do this, and this mechanical shit, right? But you have too many client lunches, you spend too much time with clients, and I didn't get a good promotion, and they hired a woman above me. And I couldn't understand that for the life of me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Relationships are everything. It's not about the deal, it's about the relationships, of which 30 years later, I have the same relationships with the same clients. I've never lost a client in my life. And it's because I know what makes them valuable. I know how to help them get home to their children. That matters to me. And I brought that emotion in everything I did, and no one's gonna tell me that that was bad. But they did promote someone above me. And when I said, well, why are you doing that? They said, well, this is a research company and she's a researcher. Well, that researcher is nowhere to be found today, and I've sold many successful companies as a result of relationships. So as a result of that, when it came to me selling my company, and of course when you run your own company, you write your own salary, and you know what everyone is doing, and you reward based on performance, not on gender, race, or age. You're doing a great job, you all should be paid equally. So here I sell my company, and I'm now an employee in a badass big company. I had 250 employees operating in 6 cities. I sell to a company with 16,000 employees operating in 83 countries. Rules change. And so it came down to my salary. And there was a woman that was head of legal. She was the attorney. But I didn't know what everyone else was making, and I was top 10 of 16,000. So when it came time to it, she's like, well, here's your salary, and here's your bonus, and here's your equity, and your vacation. And I, first of all, I take whatever vacation I need because I'll kick ass and deliver, but don't tell me if I can take a second off here and a second off there. I don't know how to work that way. And she said, so here you go. And I didn't know what everyone else was making. So I just took the negotiation out of the negotiation. And I said to her, well, is this the same of the 10 people on the board? Is everyone paid the same? Didn't matter if they were a man or a woman. I just said, is everyone paid the same? And she said, no, there's different packages. I said, well, then I'd like the best of everyone's package. I said, so just, the number one person, whether it's a man or a woman, whatever their salary is, I'll take that, because I don't want to get more than anyone else. I'll take that one. And whatever vacation you give to someone else, I'll take that one. And whatever that, I'll take that. And guess what? She gave me the best of anyone's now. And so she came back to me and says, you made me feel so responsible for you and you trusted me that I actually, everyone's of the 10s had different things. Someone had a better bonus, and someone had a better salary, and someone had a better equity. So I felt so bad, I didn't know what to give you, so I gave you the best of everyone's. So you now have the number one package in the entire company because you made me feel responsible for you. And so I kind of take the guesswork out of it, and it was the best thing I've ever done. And then it was keeping up because I never knew if the other 10 started doing their own behind my back negotiations. Right. So then I would just say to the lawyer, and by the way, whenever else someone negotiates for their stuff, make sure you just put me in the mix and give me whatever you give them. When you say yes to them, just say yes to me. So that's how I rolled. And the truth is, it's really worked in my favor. Instead of saying, well, let me think about this. And then the other thing, and then I want to let everyone else talk, the other thing that happened just recently was someone in mid-level management that is a talent agent responsible for digital and social for all the biggest celebrities. She said, I'm about to walk into my review. What should I do? She said, because everyone else has revenue by their name, how much money the box office opened to, and they get rewarded by that. But I'm social digital, which there's no metrics to really say how much revenue I generated. I said, bullshit. Create your own accountability. Create a chart, show with every talent across social how they went from this amount of likes to this amount of likes. There's always a yes. There's always a metrics that might not be dollars, but there is always a way to find your own way to say, here I am, here's what I'm doing, here's the strategy and social I created, here's how they've, increased from when I started working with them. That's dollars. It translates into it, but there's always a way to create accountability for yourself. Just find it and make it work. And don't look in the textbook. Sorry, not sorry. Don't look at it. It's not there. Make your own formula and create your own accountability to measure yourself against.
I think a couple of great takeaways from, thank you for that story. And my father used to say this all the time, nothing beats a failure but a try, right? So you took that on with, I want the best of the best package that you have here. And what's the worst that could happen? They could say no, but you asked for it, and they're not gonna give it to you unless you ask for it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
there's always a
takeaway.
yes, and, and it's the word try. Someone taught me this, and I will never forget this. One of my bosses would say, there's no such thing as trying. And he took a pen, and I think this is very est, and he threw it on the floor, and he said, try to pick it up. Of course, you play the game. It's a pen. Pick up the fucking pen. Pick up the pen. You either pick it up or you don't pick it up. So if you don't ask, you don't know. There's always a yes. Find your solution and pick up the pen.
Yeah, I think it's a great segue into talking about some of the specific points about negotiation, and in particular, actually, it's great because Sanam, I'm going to ask you to start talking to us about preparation. So we're going to take you through those steps for negotiation strategies.
Sounds great. Bear with me here as I step off. Okay, I can't see. So one of the things that we were just talking about, the fact is that you are leaving by just not negotiating on average $500,000 on the table. And that is a significant chunk of money. And not because we can't do it. It's just that we don't. So if you take one thing away from this kind of panel is negotiate. And now what we're going to talk about and throughout the rest of the panel is how, right? So you're going to go, clicker comes back again. There we go.
There we go.
See, it's not just me.
One back.
Wait for it. So it's going through. So this is dividing the stage into, you're going to have the preparation, you're going to have the talk, and we're going to talk through the answer, right? And so the way that I work is I want to be armed with, how do I do all these things? Is there a way to go back one slide? Perfect. So do your prep work. This is all on you, and you own this. We've been talking about all the different types of data that's out there at your fingertips. Make sure that you're leveraging all of this data. Know and organize your thoughts. So organize thoughts. What are your numbers? What are folks that with your experience making in the market? What is your value? There's all these different resources for you guys to go in and arm yourself. What is your walkaway number, right? We, in my team, I always talk about there's your value, there's your worth, and there's what you need. Your value is what the market says it is, based on years of experience, degree, etc., right? Your worth is the plus to the company. It's your value plus something else, the you that you bring in. What you need is what you need in order to be able to pay the mortgage. Are you single parent? Are you not? Are you trying to get that degree? So know those numbers for yourself. And also, before you go to any negotiation, know when it's not worth it to you. I just bought a home, and I went through 5 different offers. And before I even went into counter negotiations, every single time I would say, this is my walkaway number. And the last time before I bought my home, it was only $5,000 difference. And that's still a pretty big difference, but that was beyond my walkaway number, and I committed to it. And I found the home that I loved, and that's my favorite, just by having that walkaway number. So know what your walkaway number is. Timing is everything. When you go in to ask for this, if you're going up for a yearly review cycle, that's not the time. It's too late. This is when you start seeding the conversation. You need to be continuing to have the conversations with your manager or with folks around you before those events happen. Because when it's happened, it's a little too late. Not for the next round, but you have started, the timing is important here. The
Can I
other
just
thing
ask
again,
you,
go ahead.
Sanam, what does that, just to give it a little bit more concrete, what does that conversation look like for somebody who's going in for their first time to go in and ask for this big promotion with their supervisor? I'm pretty sure you have a staff, right? So as a supervisor, how would you want that employee to approach you, and you would then feel confident that you would want to move on in the discussion of whether or not this person will get a promotion or a pay raise, whatever that big thing is?
Yeah, so as a manager, it is actually amazing to have folks come up to you and tell you what they want, how you as a manager can help them, right? And so in our program, we actually have development plans. So that doesn't necessarily tie into promotion, but as a manager or any kind of part of the dialogue, you're required to have a plan 6 to 18 months out. And it's not focusing on promotion, that could be a part of it, but it's development. And part of this is what keeps you here and what would you leave for, right? And that is part of that conversation. And so I would encourage you, if depending on the promotion, if it's really the promotion that you want, start getting and understanding, hey, what's the skill set that I need? What are your thoughts on that? How can I do better? Just really developing yourself and knowing the framework, empowering yourself. I'm sure there's diagrams about different positions, all the different checkboxes you need to have. Really arming your manager to be your best advocate is really important. And then just having that dialogue with them. It's so incredibly helpful as somebody that's your direct report that comes to you and asks you for this, because then you can do it. You can do this together. So I would say just have the conversation.
I just want to intervene. I think framing the conversation, like you said, is very important, because I have so many employees that come to me with raising their hand like entitlement. I've been here 6 months, I've been here a year, it's time for my promotion. And, and so I think knowing what it is, where you are, where you want to go, what it will take to get there, and having it concretized. I make up words all the time. I don't think that's a word, but something like that in writing, because that manager might be gone, and then where are you? And so I think really understanding sort of where you are, where you want to go, because it might be to the next thing. Having those thresholds for success is also another way of creating accountability versus just it's my year anniversary, I deserve a raise, and here's what I want, and let me figure out what everyone else is making. So I think that's a really important conversation, that relationship with expectations.
Yeah, and I think to your point, this is a continuous conversation. Folks think that you go into negotiations in an isolated event, and at times there are, right? If you're negotiating for a specific thing, a car, a house, but your salary is an ongoing dialogue that you have with different folks around you, with your manager, with your manager's manager. You continue to have this, and it's little pieces that you build together that allows you to go, and then when it's time for asking for, I want to go up for this position, it's a no-brainer, because you've already had all of that legwork before. The other thing is know your market value. Again, we keep on going back to this. What's amazing to me is many, many times folks come to me, even on the initial salary negotiations, and go, I've done all this research, they pull up all this data, and they give me a range. Well, I'm gonna pick the lowest effing number in that range because you just said it's okay, right? You didn't show and you didn't give an X, number to me, and it's not that. But you basically said, this range is acceptable to me to make me feel whole on the ask you just asked me. So as a just rational person, I'm gonna say, fair enough, I'm gonna go with that number and give you room to grow. But don't give anybody that excuse. When you're doing the ranges, know that negotiations, and a lot of this is related to psychology. We feel better when we've negotiated about something, whether it's your manager or the HR person. So when you start off at a higher number or that higher range, you're actually letting them do that thing that we want in our human nature to do, and that's a bargain for exchange with the other person. The other thing is, again, back to know your exact numbers. So now that you've done all of this prep work, you're ready for this, what about the talk? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So walk away is really important, but just to build on what you were saying in more concrete terms. You want to think not just about the numbers, but also the value, meaning the qualitative value. And when Sanam's talking about growth and development, you may find that taking an option or an opportunity that may pay less in the short term, but has much more developmental investment contributed on part of the deal, makes more sense for you, because your walkaway number makes you think, oh, well, I shouldn't take that opportunity because the salary is less, but the overall growth potential and the long-term quantitative potential is higher. So that walkaway value isn't just literally, this person's offering me $5,000 more than that one in terms of my salary. It's what is the value of the total package of my opportunity here versus there. But thinking through all those things, having that boiled down to very clear metrics for you will allow you to assess this is worth my pursuing, or frankly, I can do better elsewhere.
But you might want to flip it, which is a new way of thinking, same concept, but instead of walk away, which is opt out, what about opt in? Why don't you just think about an opt in conversation, which is, I love my job. I am so happy. I hire for passion, train for skill, because I want passionate people and happy people, even if there's bad days. What if you just flip the idea? Instead of walk away, walk towards. So opt in. I love this job. I'm so happy here, you know, but there are a few things that matter to me. I have to, you know, I'm the solo, you know, sole provider in my family, so I really need a base salary of X to be able to pay my bills. Having flex in my schedule when I need to go do this and this is important, where I don't want to keep asking for permission, but I'll never miss a beat, you know, what I'm doing. Like having that kind of thing, which instead of using the walk away, it's having that conversation of things you need to make it work, to be the best performer you can be, where, you know, with the flexibility. So that's all part of negotiation. And to me, it's one of the most important. If someone came to me and said, I need this range because I've done my homework, and which is the classic way to do it, but for me that wouldn't fly. I want someone to come to me and have that personal conversation to say, I'm working my ass off, I care about this company, I'm never leaving you, you know, I need to make X to do this, I've got kids, I want to hit the soccer games and I want to go to this, how can we, you know, work the culture here to, you know, accommodate that? I will do that any day, anytime, because I know that that person cares, and it's not for just the generic reason.
Yeah.
So it's the same concept, but bringing the emotion to the table.
Yeah, and building on that, it's not a walk away, and part of this is that we were talking about numbers in our dialogue here, but walk away, it really should be that number sign, so hashtag blank, right? Is it the title? Is it the vacation? Is it the bonus? Is it the opportunity? Are you switching into that? So we can flip this and say, what are you walking towards and building towards together? But it's our title or topic is about numbers, but there's really beyond numbers, right? Is it the better title? Is it a different practice group? So really when I say, and this is all, mind you, mental, right? This is what, again, you take the reality of what you are, what you need, what you're building on, and then you decide whether it's a walk away, number, value, et cetera, or walk towards thing for yourself. But at the end of the day, if you don't know what you need, how is someone going to help you get it? And I think that's the big takeaway on this.
Right.
Yeah. So the talk. So you did all this prep. You're ready to go. What do you do on the talk itself, right? And power up. Part of this is, what is your ritual? Where do you get the most strength? Is it talking to yourself in the mirror? You know, is it powering yourself up? Is it listening to your favorite song? Is it grabbing a cup of coffee? Do the thing that puts you in the best position where you feel the most confident. Is it wearing a hot pink dress when you're getting up and talking to somebody when it's uncomfortable for you? You know, do what you want to do to make sure that you've powered up before your conversation, right? Ask for what you want, right? The biggest thing that we've heard today in the stories is, so what if you get a no, right? At least you got a no. If you've never asked, you can never hear the possibility of a yes.
Right.
Making the ask. Position the ask. It's timing, right? How are you doing this? Don't fear the no. No is just the opposite of yes. Figure out how to get to the yes. Practice your pitch. Make sure that you're practicing this before. It makes us all uncomfortable. We think in our mind, we talk a certain way, our body language is a certain way. Practice in front of a friend. Practice in front of the mirror, right? Do this practice before you go in. Start with questions. Again, all of negotiations is a dialogue, whether it's with one person or with many. You have to gauge if they're present. You need to redirect that energy. Maybe they're having a shitty day, and that is the bad time to ask, right? Maybe you redirect that energy. Maybe you wait to have a conversation later. Maybe it's something else that you can use to connect with that person as a human-to-human connection. So make sure that you start with questions. Stay positive, not pushy. Now, this one's really controversial for me because I think in my kind of profession, especially in the legal world, and I do a lot of negotiations in corporate side, There's more females, but there's not a lot of us. And I always worry about kind of the pushy. What I'm saying is continue to be positive and continue to advocate for yourself, right?
Just replace the word positive or pushy with confident.
Yeah.
Just own who you are, because that's such a dumb thing when we talk about pushy and everyone says men are brave and women are pushy and all that. Just say, I'm confident, change the word.
There we go.
But I
Start
think
the
there's a good
lexicon.
point in there, which is about being yourself. And this comes, I'm a coach on the side, and this comes from the coaching side of myself, is that, I can't be like Dan is in a negotiation. I might have grown up under you and watched you negotiate, but I've got to come up with my own style and what works for me. Because if you are not authentic in a negotiation, that will shine through, and that can turn people off. So it's figuring out who you are as part of a negotiation and being that person and letting that person shine through.
And owning your strength. Just because you're a woman
Yes.
doesn't mean, you have different, the man versus the woman. Own your feminine characteristics. I mean, women are nurturers. That's why it's easier for us to negotiate for others, because we want to make everyone else, feel good. And we're about the we and not the I. I mean, we don't say, I did this, and we always talk about the we, which is so important.
So in the interest of time, we're going to move it to the next slide. We want to make sure we have some time for questions.
And then
So think of those questions.
So the final is the answer, right? A lot of times when someone throws out an offer, you say yes. Don't. Wait. Use time to your advantage, right? Don't be afraid to counteroffer. Don't be afraid. This is just the starting of negotiations. Nothing's set in stone until it's done. In fact, when I'm hiring for my position, particularly for my commercial team, if they don't negotiate their salary, they're out. It doesn't make any sense. If the job and skill set requires you to do that, and if they don't, you're not advocating for yourself. How can I trust you to advocate on behalf of the company as a shareholder?
Wow, so can I just ask, so
yeah.
if you make an offer to somebody, this is so interesting. So you make an offer to somebody and then they just come back and say yes. How do you, as an employment lawyer, how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I actually engage in that dialogue, and I pick up the phone and I said, do you think that that was fair? How is it that you approach that? And I really want to have that, because that's a teaching moment, right?
Yeah.
They're going to take that experience and they're not going to negotiate their next job. And together, we're setting the standard for the person next to you, right? So when you don't negotiate, that person to your right and to your left either might not negotiate or won't get the benefit of that increase that you did and that effort that you're doing.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting. Okay.
so if the boss won't budge, that's okay. It's a no, that's fine. We'll figure out how to make it to a yes. Keep negotiating, keep going on, right? At some point, you guys will reach success. So do one thing before I get back on stage with me. You need to do me a favor and stand up if you guys are able.
Us two?
Stand up if you're able, right? Take one step forward, all right? You guys being at that conference, this is your one step forward. You are no longer in that same place. You took one step. Now look to your right, okay? Look to your left. Look how many people are taking that step with you. Step one, go. Now you're done.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm scared to press the button and see. Okay, we have some key takeaways that we're going to talk about, which are don't be afraid to negotiate, which came up, and then also know your value in the market. I wanted to ask this question. I mean, for me, working with folks in corporate, I have people who can go out and look at market surveys for how much and tell me that. But if you're on your own, is it just as simple as doing some research online, or how would you suggest that people approach that? Go ahead, Dan.
No, I would, 3 to 4 months before my next review, I would be interviewing for other jobs, just casually interviewing, finding out what's in the market for me. When someone sees me, what's the value, right? So it's a little bit more robust than just a survey or an average, right? And it'll give you confidence, because if they're willing to make an offer, even before you go into your setup and say, hey, I know my review's coming up, but I just got an offer. And you just tell them about it. I just got an offer. What are you thinking? Is this something I should consider? I consider you a mentor. You advise me. And then they'll say, wow, you got a really good offer. I wasn't going to offer you that in your review, but they know they have some information. So it's about leverage. It's about finding out what's in the market, and you just got to network more.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think people get a lot of promotions where we are from getting another offer outside, and I don't know if that's been your experience at other
That
companies.
disturbs me.
but-
Am I allowed to say that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's great.
It's just sort of a
And that's
pattern.
wonderful, but every time, I had 250 employees, if anyone came in, and that works, but not for me, because I create lifestyle cultures, and If someone came in and said, you know, I went and interviewed somewhere else, and so if you don't match this, I'm out of here, I'll say, go take that. Because by the time you've done that, it means your passion is not with me, and that you're always looking over. And for me, it's not just about money. In my life, in 35 years I've been in business, I have never thought about the money first. I always thought about doing the best job, being in a place that I want to go every day. And by the way, I did quite well as a result. Passion came first. I always was, you know, building new ecosystems and new ways of being the best that I could be, because I play with myself, I challenge myself of how to be the best business development person. I had the games of how do I, when I first started out in business development, it was how do I get to the CEO, because you have to go through the assistant. At the time they were secretaries, now they're assistants. Being best friends with the assistant. I knew what they ate for breakfast, how many kids I had, and next thing you know, I had that meeting. And once I got that meeting, which was hard, I said, I'm never walking out of a meeting without a no. I always knew that there would be a yes, whether it's the next date on the calendar, the money that I needed, you know, for the deal, or the next meeting, you know, whatever it was. There was always a yes. I challenged myself. But if an employee came to me and said, you know, and this has happened a number of times, so I'm not saying it's not a good strategy in certain professions. With me, I would say, take that job, because that's where
I was just
you
going to
should
say,
go.
you know what I think the key to that is knowing your audience, right? Which I
Correct.
think came up. So if you have that relationship that you've built, not at the time that you're trying to get the promotion, you're like, hey, let's go to coffee, but you've built that relationship over time with your supervisor, with the department head, whomever it is, then you have that ability to know that
And it
Shelley,
means-
Shelley thinks this way, or that Dan thinks this way, or Sanam thinks this way, or you know, whatever it is. So it's really important to build that relationship. I'll let you go, and then we got to get
Yeah,
some
but
time
I
for questions.
addressed that, but I said, if someone said that to me, I said, were we missing the conversation here?
Mm-hmm.
Where is the communication gap that you went straight looking versus, and I readdressed saying, what's wrong with us here in our culture if I got to that point where you did that to have to come to me? So I learned from that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you can switch it around. So I wasn't really looking. I have some friends that just were recruiting someone like me, and I just, you know, had coffee.
Yeah.
And it's just letting them know that you're valuable, you're wanted. I wasn't looking. I'm busy enough. I don't want to take it, but just to let you know that.
Well,
that's
there's just so much data. I know because my reports always come to me with data. If there's Glassdoor, you can even, based on your location, years of experience, the specific sector, there's just so much data online now that you can arm yourself with if you don't want to look at the other job. Or you can even take the recruiter calls just out of curiosity, but you don't put your foot into that other job just so that you don't have, again, knowing your audience, you get that data that you need.
So we want to make sure, because we're at our time for questions, are there, and maybe as someone makes their way up to the microphone, then does you want to say
While
something?
people are walking
Dr.
up, if I could just summarize this and put a little of a gender spin on it. There are different ways of getting leverage in negotiations. One way of getting leverage is getting outside offers. That is something that is quite gendered in many fields, particularly for positions in which going on the job search requires moving. High-powered women tend to be married to or have partners who are also themselves in high-power, high-status careers, and you may have more of a two-body problem than men who, on average, may have more flexible spouses at home. And so that sort of going to the market to assess your value may be less viable as an option for gaining leverage for women than men. And if that's the case, fine. So you need to think about other ways to gain leverage and having the kind of conversations that you've been hearing on the panel and gathering information from other sources are other alternative ways of getting leverage.
Yes, come on up.
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to say I'm an IT recruiter. I negotiate salaries every single day. And all the advice you gave was just terrific and so on target. I particularly agree with you, Shelley. Go with your emotion. Really look at what's in front of you. Don't do it for the money. Do it because you really love it. This is what you want to do. And when I look back at my younger self, I think everything we're talking about here, I didn't push hard enough. There's a right way to do it without being pushy, but just knowing your facts, knowing your value, knowing what you really want to do for the company. And if you think of it that way, you'll always be fine. And I should have pushed harder when I was, my younger self. So thank you.
And share it. Like, I think that's the other thing we talk about. With me, I always thought differently, and I knew I was different. I kept owning who I was, knowing that I wasn't going to be I was always going to be a relationship person even though I wasn't valued for it. I now share that story, and it's why I formed the Girls Lounge. Relationships matter.
Absolutely.
And sharing the what. Don't hire me to fill a quota, hire me because I make the table better, and here's why.
And I'll say this, every relationship matters. You will get something out of things that you never, ever expected. It'll come back to you in ways that you, like, wow, where did that come from? So every single relationship, no matter who it is, and just like you're saying, you make friends with every admin, with everyone, exactly. It works, but push harder for yourself, ladies, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. Thank you guys so much for your time. You know, I noticed it said don't be afraid to negotiate on the key takeaways, but not always negotiate. And I was wondering, I think a lot of times I'm myself in my negotiations, I don't really have them because many times the range that I have in mind, if they go above that, then should you still negotiate? Like if you feel like your worth is being valued and you have what you wanted, should you still negotiate?
What do you lose? What do you lose if you don't? Right? You hit that magic number. But what do you lose if you just push that number up, push that title up?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you lose?
Nothing. But how do you?
We'll let that sit for a second.
So I guess my
Nothing.
question
Did
then.
everybody hear that
I would
though?
say you put yourself in the wrong range. That's usually, this is a personal opinion, but I think that that's what happened, is that if someone else is giving you that range, you chose the wrong range, and you need to readjust your range. And I would figure out what parameter it was that's there. And again, this is be authentic, because we're not saying negotiate just for the sake of it. If that's not your home space and you don't want to, then fucking don't do it. That's not comfortable to you, right? But do pause for a second and say, did I mess up that range, right? Did I undervalue myself? And just, again, you don't miss out on anything.
And I think going back to something that Sanam said earlier is, what's the message that you're sending in not negotiating, right? What is the other side? I mean, there's so much psychology to it. What is the other side going to think if I don't go back and put something on the table? How does that affect this negotiation? But how does that affect my future with this company, with this supervisor, this manager? Got to think about that stuff.
I think also the more you differentiate yourself, because I talk about if we're all the same, then you're not necessary. Find your differentiator. Like every time I've been in a company, I knew that I was, the queen of relationships or whatever it was. If I was gone, they would miss me because I had a unique skill set. I worked it. I created it. I had the team. If I was missing, what is going to happen? If you have a lot of Me Too's, there's a great story of a guy in an ad agency that got up and he ran a group and he said, I did this and I did this and I did this. And his whole team was sitting there. His boss came to him and said, if you're doing everything, what do you need all these people for? Get rid of them. So don't be an I. Find what makes you unique and play that value to say, I have, and teams diversity is not about gender, race, or age. It's about skill set and mindset. Be different. Have a team full of differences. And when you have that, you're priceless. So make yourself priceless.
We say this, I don't know for you guys, but I say this now because I didn't negotiate. And I saw that pain, I saw the percentage. So while the percentage of increases at my previous role were the same as across the company, where I started out, I failed me. So that's why I say do it, because I've seen the difference and the impact when you actually don't.
You can think about things in addition to salary that you can negotiate. So if you think about for the same salary, 2 jobs, what would I want that would make me more satisfied, more successful here? And you can ask for some of those things.
I think we have time for one more question. Okay.
Hi, I'm Brianna. I work at Google. So I heard a study recently that found that women on average were scoring about 100 points lower on the SAT math section because of the quarter-point deduction for every wrong answer you get. And they found in controlled studies that if they removed the penalty for getting a wrong answer, that women actually scored as the same or higher than men. And so what the SAT is now doing is removing this penalty because it's a biased practice, right? So my question is, how do we think bigger? Like, if we are talking about how negotiation is a biased, sexist practice that disadvantages women because of how we've been socialized, how can we talk bigger about changing attitudes, paying for the role? I understand we have to live in a man's world right now, but I'm thinking larger picture. What do we do?
I mean, we're having a new conversation, in the female quotient, which has the Girls Lounge, and it's about why should we individually, man or woman, have to work this hard on, it should be equal pay for equal work, and it should be transparency. And that starts at the top. It really does. And so, we're spending a lot of time at the World Economic Forum in Davos with world leaders and corporate leaders on how do we just change, stop conforming to the rules, but transform them. And we're living in a new day and age. And Mark Benioff from Salesforce did it right. He said, with technology today, it's an enabler. It's a one-button push. See where the wage gaps are across the board. It cost him $3 million. It pinched, but he did it. And now moving forward, it's equal pay for equal work, where it takes the negotiation out of the equation. And I think that we do have to get past the individual having to work this hard to cultural responsibility. And we're starting to create accountability metrics. We've never had them before. I have a segment on Bloomberg called Walk the Talk starting in September. And Bloomberg on their terminal now is a GEI, a Gender Equality Index, to equate to business success. Finally, accountability for companies that are doing that. We're creating a GEM, a Gender Equality Metrics, with the ANA and the AFE on advertising and media and entertainment of how women are portrayed, from visibility to objectification, so that we create metrics that matter. If you can't measure it, you can't create accountability. The more accountability, the company's not doing it will have FOMO factor and rise the ranks. So I think it has to be at this leadership level of committing to tangible changes, like Mark Benioff, push the button, see what happens, so that it takes this individual negotiation and unconscious bias and all that kind of stuff out of the equation. I think that's where we have to go.
Dr. Bendersky, I'd love to have you close us out just with a response to that, because I think it's a really important, all of the questions have been really important, but it's a really important question. I think you could close us out with what your maybe theories and analysis has been from all your research and what you think about this.
I agree. I think that both things need to be going on simultaneously. One is thinking about transforming work practice, organization practice, industry practice to take the individual out of the equation more. And the other is to be empowering and upskilling people so that we are able to play in the field that we're on with equality and even opportunity.
I asked Davida if I could just take a moment, and my name is Susie Rue. I am a VC and investor at Atom Factory and Cross Culture Ventures, and I was just on the last panel. But I just wanted to take a minute, and wow, this mind blown. I just want to say that I struggle with this, even as an investor, investing in women and minority entrepreneurs and in majority entrepreneurs. I struggle with this very much personally and have for the last couple of years or throughout my entire career. And Shelley, I've been to the Girls Lounge across CES, South by, and even Cannes. And Dan, your partner Don advises me on this, just out of his leisure. And Sanam, this is amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I think that this panel deserves a freaking standing ovation.
Wow. Thank you.
That was very kind.
Thank you. Thank you for just such amazing insight on that. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we are recording this. We will make these videos available so that you can go back and look at this and really learn from this, because it's going to take studying and research and doing the work of yourselves to actually get better at the things that we need to get better at. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel, and you guys can take your seats. And we're going to take a short break, about a 5-minute break. The track 1 people are actually, they've migrated back in, and we're going to set up for our keynote speaker, Nani De La Pena, and we're very, very excited to have her. Okay, thank you.